The AAOS Bone Beat Orthopedic Podcast channel is pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of the AAOS Now podcast. This monthly podcast series covers a broad range of topics to help orthopedic surgeons stay informed, enhance their practices, and provide the best possible care for their patients.
Welcome to the AAOS Now podcast. I'm Dr. Stuart Fischer of the AAOS Now editorial board. And today we're going to be talking with two members of the Academy's Patient Engagement Task Force. Dr. Jim Barber is in practice in Douglas, Georgia. He's been active in many phases of the Academy and served on many councils and committees and been active in his state society and other organizations in the state of Georgia. Dr. Monica Payares practices at Phoenix Children's Hospital in Phoenix, Arizona, and her specialty is pediatrics and pediatric neuromuscular disease. Both have been working on the Patient Engagement Task Force for the past 2 years. Dr. Barber, Dr. Payares, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I'd really like to start by asking, why did the Board of Directors create a task force?
Dr. Fischer, this is actually a great question. And so I was part of the board. I'm a member at large under 45. I was also part of the strategic planning committee. And during this time, we wanted to reframe what are the next 5 years of the Academy going to look like. And we've always been there for our members. So members still stay strong as a good pillar for our organization, our culture as well. And there were two new pillars that were developed with musculoskeletal community and with patients. So part of this project, then subsequently in the following years, as we start to implement where our strategic plans are going and more of the boots on the ground of not just the planning portion, we did create the Patient Engagement Task Force. And the idea was, how does the Academy get to the patients? How do we get this humongous, very nebulous concept into actual action for our patients? How does the Academy, what is our role? How are we going to do to actually get patients more up the front of what we are doing? And so this is when this was created.
So who's on the task force?
Dr. Payares and myself serve as co-chairs. Dr. Adam Bruggeman was the Advocacy Council chair. Dr. Jason Coe was from Communications Committee underneath membership. Lily Marks is a public member on the board who served on the task force. Dr. Michael Parks, our second vice president, was on the task force, and Armando Vidal from the Education Council served on the task force, along with a number of really hardworking Academy staff. Todd Applebaum, Anna Salt-Troyce, Connie Thorson, Ben Harkinson, Donna Mallard, Tony Priori, and Lori Schoaf.
So there's quite a wealth of both information and talent. Now, what really were the goals of the task force here? We want to put patients first, right?
Correct. And I think everything that we do, our patients are at the upfront. But we wanted to look at what exactly and how are the different councils and committees within our organization putting patients first. So we actually, our role and our orders were, what are we doing? So let's explore what's already being done and how we can shine some light into those, whether to enhance those efforts, support them so that we have more priorities or kick them up a notch in the list of to-dos for each council and each committee.
Stuart, I might add that one of the interesting things about this task force, it's certainly a new situation for me, was the task force was not created to generate new ideas or to be a think tank, but instead was primarily charged with coordinating the councils and the committees and then communicating between councils and the board. So it was a really interesting task force.
And did that evolve over time?
We stuck to it.
Yes. I think the important part was, let's have this sort of bi-directional communication with the councils and the committees, with the board, and see how we can actually put this strategic goal and this strategic pillar up front. And so what are we doing? So for instance, our biggest accomplishment, I think, was we realized, how do we get to the patients? And what is our closest way to get to the patients? That's obviously, besides what we do as surgeons, and clinicians, and it is patient education. And so patient education and ortho info became our biggest, I say it's our biggest accomplishment for this task force. So one of the things that we did is, this is how the patients learn directly from us about orthopedics and orthopedic education, right? So ortho info is a phenomenal source. I have used it in practice. A lot of us in the board had used it in practice as well. And if this is the most direct way that we have access to the patients through our organization, why don't we revamp this? In today's day and age, you can go online and there's a million different sources. But what is a source that is trusted? And the AAOS should provide that information as the trusted source for musculoskeletal health. And so being able to look into that, being able to come up with a proposal, and we actually were able to approve funding for OrthoInfo to revamp it. And I think that was probably the biggest win for this task force.
So basically, the task force is focused on getting patients more engaged, more aware, more involved. Have you done?
I think the goal of the task force was to collect all of the existing ideas, collate them, prioritize them into quick wins, continue plans, or planning for the future. The task force did successfully collect all of the things that are going on and did successfully prioritize them. And ultimately, we did come up with 3 really great things from the task force that we accomplished. But there's much more work that will be ongoing even after this task force is sunsetted. The take home from the task force is the patient is important. And the academy, our members, we all need to remain focused on the patient. So yes, we did accomplish the task.
And did you get much input from communications and advocacy?
Absolutely. I think with communication, part of how we're getting that information there, so they were a big part of that. So OrthoInfo falls under the Communications Council. And so we had their advice, and it was this bi-directional support, and they were happy to actually get funded. The funding was approved just at the end of 2025. And so this is something that's going to be, so OrthoInfo will be revamped in the next coming months. And then we'll see the tracking changes and how this much more improved information with availability, multi-language, and all sorts of things that are happening to enhance the information that's getting out there. And then we can track to see how those efforts can be successful. That will be the next step, right? Our first step was to sort of bring up to light what we are doing currently, then follow through with the councils in the coming months and years to make sure they continue to do this. The other one, in terms of advocacy, that we actually was another goal, part of the Advocacy Council, was recollecting patient stories and use this to show our congressmen and women that these issues that we may be having and that we are confronting in this day and age is not just coming from us as the clinicians, what we're doing for our patients, but they can hear directly from the patients themselves and how their care may have been hindered with different regulations. And this is another goal of obtaining these stories, and this was already accomplished by the Advocacy Council.
Yeah, most surgeons, I think, feel that patients who are better engaged, better informed, have more knowledge, get more involved in their care, and have better outcomes.
100%.
100%, yeah. So that one of the goals would be to get patients more up to speed and get patients more interested and probably get them more information, because the more information they have, the better they'll do. So I was interested in what you said about OrthoInfo, because I personally had a long involvement with OrthoInfo. So what changes are recommended and what's planned, and what resources is the Board of Directors putting forward to make OrthoInfo stronger?
The board has allotted significant funding to improve OrthoInfo, and there's 6 things that are going to come out of the revamping of OrthoInfo. One that I think all of the listeners are aware of is the role of search engines and AI in finding orthopedic information. So one of the big things is optimizing the search engine so that OrthoInfo is more visible to AI and to patient searches. We want the OrthoInfo to be the top result when a patient searches for orthopedic information. Another practical thing that needs to be done is the website needs to come into compliance with disability requirements, and there'll be funding for that. Monica mentioned providing the information in additional languages. And this is something that's really important in my area. I have a tremendous number of Spanish-speaking patients, so very excited about that. Another exciting tool that listeners may not be aware of is the ability to find an AAOS surgeon within OrthoInfo. So this is almost a marketing tool for members, but we want patients who find orthopedic information at OrthoInfo to then be able to find an AAOS surgeon. And then something that some members might find useful is the ability to brand OrthoInfo to their particular practice. That's another thing that's coming down the road. And then finally, the last thing is refreshing the appearance, the user interface, and the user experience. So those are the 6 things that will be happening this next year.
So a question I want to ask you both. You both have different types of practices. I'd like to ask you if the type of patient education and communication that you need is different. In other words, Jim, you see single episodes of care, a fracture, a torn meniscus, a rotator cuff tear. Monica, you're dealing with neuromuscular disease in children, which tends to be chronic and ongoing. You're going to follow these patients for a long period of time for what is, in effect, one continuous problem. Do you think that the type of education or educational materials required is different?
I mean, I can answer for myself. I think it is a little bit different, and the way that we use it may be a little bit different, okay? So for instance, every day I am in clinic, I will meet a brand new family that maybe are just getting the diagnosis of cerebral palsy. I have also have the first time I'm meeting somebody and they're being 12 years in. And equally, I have to educate them on what cerebral palsy actually means. It's impressive the amount of years these families have gone to visit multiple different specialties, having that diagnosis and still not understanding what that means. And so I'm huge on patient education. Why? Because then their outcomes and expectations is going to be different. They have to understand that this is not, they're not going to come to me and I'm going to lengthen their tendon or put their hips back in place and all of a sudden CP is gone and they're going to walk like a typically developing child. And so it really is a process, and it does take multiple visits for them to process this and understanding. So my initial education on what cerebral palsy is can be a discussion and a conversation and the musculoskeletal implications of that. But then subsequently, I'm going to give you then these resources for you to read. And when we see each other again, you're going to come up with these questions. And there may be these treatment options, non-operative treatment first, then surgical treatment. So there will be multiple points of education. Whereas if I had, because I also take call, if I have a fracture patient, I meet you in pre-op most of the time, right, that night. But then I'm still going to educate you. This is the process. I may see them once or twice. So I think the education may be a little bit different. Maybe I give them a handout of a protocol for postoperative rehab. And so education nonetheless.
So from my perspective, patient engagement is important for 2 reasons. One, selfish reasons that our members will benefit from. We're selfish because we know that patients have better outcomes when we're engaged with them. Part of that is education, but a perfect post-op x-ray does not mean a perfect outcome. So we need to engage patients to get better outcomes, and patients make better surgical decisions when we're engaged with them. And we are all about shared decision-making now. But beyond the selfish reasons, it's just the right thing to do. It's part of why patients trust us. It's part of why we have a fiduciary responsibility. But it's our obligation to be engaged with patients. And that was the purpose of the pillar and the strategic plan and the point of the task force. Specifically, though, you did ask me about my practice. So I do want to add a little flavor because I don't have the same kind of practice that Monica has. And no, patients do not come to me with a torn meniscus or torn rotator cuff. They come to me with vague pain, which may or may not be orthopedic. So the kind of engagement and education I need is, let's talk about what orthopedic conditions are like. And do you have a torn rotator cuff? It's usually, no, my shoulder hurts. And it may be cervical pathology or it may be shoulder pathology, who knows? But we spend a lot of time trying to find out what's the problem before we get to the OR for sure. I'm sure that my practice is vastly different than Monica's as far as that goes. And so I think your point is that the Academy should provide resources for that entire spectrum for all the members from diagnosing to treatment. And that's really true for all members.
So what other resources, things such as patient toolkits, came up during this process?
One of the things that came up was out of the Research and Quality Council regarding CPGs. And one of the things that we felt was important was sharing the burden of orthopedic pathology. CPGs are a great way to monitor that burden. And those CPGs can be used not only for members, which I'm sure members use CPGs all the time, I do, but also shared from an advocacy perspective, talking about the burden of orthopedic pathology and how important it is that we are able to treat patients. It strikes me that a lot of the stuff that Monica and I have been working on covers so many aspects of the Academy. It's not simply in one council or another. It's so diverse how all of these different things we were working on are linked in pretty much everything we do. And I think it just goes back to the principle that it's all about the patient. Everything that we do throughout the Academy is all about the patient, and everything we do in our practices are all about the patient. And so there's been a lot of tools out there that we didn't necessarily develop in this task force, but the councils and committees have been working on those things and will continue to work on those things.
Yeah, and that part of what you recommended, I think, was getting patients to be more advocates. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I can speak to that because I was wrong on that subject, and I'll explain. The way that we are working on getting patients to be better advocates is through shared stories. As Monica mentioned, we talked about collecting patient stories and how effective that is at the Capitol Hill and how important it is to collect those stories. And the Academy is committed to collecting stories every year that can be shared for advocacy purposes. Initially, I thought it would be really cool if we could get patients to advocate for us on specific orthopedic issues. It turns out that this was looked into, and it was found out to be not a great idea, not ready for prime time. And patients can't, it's not effective or possible for us to manage patient advocacy directly. So that was something that I thought would be really cool. That turned out it wasn't actually a good idea. And I think that's a testament really to the bi-directional communication of this task force, where someone thought they had a good idea, and then it turns out that's not such a great idea, and the feedback comes back, and then it's obvious that, yeah, you know what, that's not a great idea. Let's put that on hold, and let's focus on the things that are more effective, more efficient at this time.
So what you meant was bringing patients to Capitol Hill. So bringing patients in person to help us advocate for our issues in Capitol Hill. So I think in that sense, like, how do we do it? Not the fact that we're actually having the patients advocate for themselves, which they can. It was just more effective to do it in the how we did it, not bringing them directly, but then sharing their patient stories. So we actually have videos of the patients telling the story themselves. And I think that is actually probably a lot easier. I can tell you, yes, having patient stories is extremely effective. And so we do videos to do that and put it in the faces of people that can actually do something for us and actually help us resolve the issues that come about. And so I think their advocacy, we give them that voice, we give them that platform, and that is what the AAOS can do for our patients. So I think that alone can be quite impactful. It may not be direct, like we didn't bring it so you can see it, but I feel like we're still giving them a good voice and giving them a platform for them to share their story, and having those people in power to make those decisions actually hear it from them directly.
So it puts a human face on story, and having patients tell their own stories may be very impactful to the public, our legislators, and to everyone around us, and to advancing the field. So
Correct.
there's a plan to do more of that. Now, are we going to be working with any industry partners at all?
Yes, but the most important thing for the listeners to hear is that discussions are not exclusive. that we are open to partnering with any industry and we're not excluding anyone. There are many things going on with the industry, and we do want to find ways to engage patients in collaboration with industry. So, for instance, industry can survey patients using the OrthoInfo platform. We will license OrthoInfo content to industry so that they're using high-quality education that we've developed. We'll develop co-branded patient engagement marketing campaigns and enhance various websites where there's a Find a Doc platform. We'll build that around AAOS so that AAOS is helping to promote members. And you might have seen at the last meeting, we've engaged with the pickleball community through industry. And we've also integrated some industry content and videos into OrthoInfo itself.
Well, that's good. And pickleball is a growing sport.
Supposedly.
So another topic that's come up related to patients is patient-reported outcome measures. Did you all review that and how patient education can affect?
I don't think that came up specifically, Stu, but we're all proud of the registry information that we've got. We feel like we're getting a real handle on outcomes, and we all understand that the patient outcome is more important than the x-ray, so to speak. Engaging the patient is putting, as you said, a human face on that registry data, on that outcomes measures. When we share stories, when we collect stories from patients, when we engage with them to have them tell us their story about their injury and how they recovered from it or whatnot, that's putting a human face on something that we do, which is just a nice balance with numbers or spreadsheets. It goes hand in hand. And yes, I do think that engaging the patient, focusing on the patient, will enhance how we use proms, because proms can be abstract, but the patient is a face, as you mentioned.
As well as if we work on their education from the beginning, before they become our surgical patients, right? When they become our patients, we educate them from before. Their expectations of what the outcome should look like will be different. I'm not saying to have better, but I'm like, hey, my expectation was that if I do this and I follow through with these instructions from my side that I may have not known, so that initial patient-reported outcome, if we do like a pre and post, like we do, for instance, for a CP child, right? I know that these were my expectations. Your expectations will be more in line with what is actually expected. So they may or may not be more accurate in that sense. And this is obviously past that patient engagement task force duties, but patient-reported outcomes are going to be coming into our reimbursement and things like that. So it's really up to us to educate our patients, to make sure that we're collecting the data, to make sure that we're getting the outcomes, because they are tying all of this up in with how we're actually going to get reimbursed. And so all of these things are tools that we are providing in the Academy to educate ourselves and our members on how are we managing our patient care and how they're looking at us so that we can have sustainable practices.
So this has been an interesting discussion. Jim, Monica, do either of you have any further thoughts on the Academy's efforts and your task force on patient education?
I'll just share three thoughts that I've had from this experience. The first was that I was reminded during this task force service that the patient is at the forefront of all that we do. I know that we say that, but it's really true. The second thing I've discovered from this task force is that our members can be incredibly proud of the governance structure that the Academy has. This was not a top-down, heavy-handed, do this, do that type of task force. This was a true bi-directional communication, listening, coordinating task force where ideas were shared and some ideas rose to the top and some ideas were felt to be not ready. And it was a beautiful example of democratic, bi-directional communication between the board and the councils and the committees, and it was just a beautiful thing to partake in. And then the last thing I learned from the task force is that we just have a ton of really hardworking volunteer doctors and hardworking staff, and everyone involved is all about the goal of improving orthopedics. And it's just a true blessing to be able to take care of people, and we need to make an effort to give back. So I've been encouraged, and I would encourage the listeners to get more involved with the Academy OrthoPAC. be more proactive in making an effort to make the chosen profession that we are so blessed to participate in, make it better for the next generation after us. That's what I've learned from this task force.
I just want everyone who is listening, first of all, thank you for having this and really getting the word out about how really it works. I mean, I can say I am younger in the academy in that sense. Lots of people had different thoughts of what the academy is really doing or not doing. Is it the board doing everything? Is it the staff doing everything? Is it like 3 or 4 volunteers that are just taking over? And it really hasn't been like that. I've had a fantastic experience. I came in during a strategic planning year, and I have been for the past 3 years sitting on all those tables and on all those calls, and honestly, seeing everybody work together and seeing all the things that have been accomplished. Nobody can tell me, oh, the academy is only about this or that. I know we are because I'm there. And I want everybody out there to see all the hard work that's going into. We're putting ourselves, our patients first. We want what's best for the field of orthopedics and enhance it and improve it and make positive change for the changing world. And so that is what the AAOS is doing. We are trying to debunk some myths and things that have been happening for several years before. This is your academy now, and this is where we're going.
So Dr. Jim Barber, Dr. Monica Payares, Patient Engagement Task Force, thanks so much for joining us, and good luck.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the AAOS Now podcast, part of the AAOS Bonebeat Orthopedic podcast channel. Production and editing provided by MK Quinn Media. Don't miss out on future episodes of the AAOS Now podcast. Bookmark our page, aaos.org/AAOS-now-podcast. Listen to new and past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the Health Podcast Network, and watch video versions of every episode on the AAOS Now podcast YouTube channel.